Hi everyone. The work I'm going to introduce here is contactless control flow monitoring. We're looking at the electrical magnetic side channels, and we're working on the PLC, the programmer logic controllers. Programmer logic controllers are important, a fundamental part of the industrial control systems. They're connected directly to the physical world to control like applications like the electricity grids, water treatment, oil and gas refineries. So they control these very important infrastructures. So the compromise of them will cause like catastrophic damages. So they are attractive targets to the attackers. These like a cyber physical systems, they are connected, internet connected, so they are vulnerable to these cyber attacks. Example of the attacks including the port scanning and control system specific protocol modifications. Here are some examples of the attacks on the PLCs. And the very famous Stuxnet, it attacked the large number of centrifuges in the Iran's nuclear program and caused huge damages to it. To speak of the protection techniques on these industrial control systems, there are two categories: the offline methods and the online methods. So for offline methods, the techniques, they try to look at the code before it is actually running on the device, on the PLCs. Example of such techniques is like, for example, the trusted safety verifiers, which it serves as a bumper in the wire between the human operator and the PLC. It intercepts the control code is uploaded to the PLC and to see if any safety requirement is violated. These offline methods has the limitation that they're not able to capture the dynamic execution behaviors of the program. So online methods are proposed. So online methods, they try to monitoring the executions of the PLC at the runtime. They usually do is they try to put an extra piece of code in the PLC to supervise the executions. Example of such techniques including the CPAC. But also it has its limitations. So first, like PLC is a control device, so it has very strict real-time constraints, and also it has limited software resources. So put an extra code in the PLC will potentially cause the delay of the executions, and moreover, might cost the resource overhead. Also, since the code is also running in the same PLC, it is under the same attack vectors that are targeting at the PLC. So to deal with these problems, so we proposed a contactless monitoring methods using the EM like emanations. So given an overview of our approach, so we have a PLC running a control logic program, and during the execution of the program, there will be EM emanations coming from the device. We captured the signals using the EM probe and look at the signals to see if something is wrong. So like our system stays away completely from the PLCs, so they will not cause the problems that, as I mentioned, like the time constraints and the resource overhead. These EM emanations of digital devices has been studied before on various applications, like for example, to break the cryptographic algorithm implementations, or to profile in the program executions. And most related to our work is to track the executions of the program. So what is electrical magnetic emanations of a digital device or a processor? So we have a processor here, and it has a lot of CMOS components inside. The switching on and off of these components will cause the changes in the current on circuit. And these changes of current will transmit it into the ambient air in the form of an electrical magnetic field, and it can be captured by an EM sensor. Different instructions that are being executed will have different emanation patterns because they utilize different resources in the processor. To illustrate this, we compiled the EM emanations of different instructions. So basically, what we did is we have each of these instructions repeatedly executed in a loop, and we collect the signals at the same time. It can be seen that these different instructions, we computed the local spectrum of these signals, and to look at their frequency characteristics. It can be seen from this figure that different instructions have like discriminative spectrum features. To further verify our observations, we conduct a classifications on these signals. The details of the classification models are shown on the right. So basically, we picked one instruction from one of the PLC instruction categories. These categories include the basic arithmetic operations, advanced math, bit comparing, array manipulations, and branch control, and some more complicated modules. As can be seen from this confusion matrix, most of the samples we collected are correctly classified into their true class. So which means that these EM emanations of different instructions are discriminative, are distinguishable. So how are we gonna relate this observations of the instruction level emanations to the control flow of the program? So an execution of a program goes to different basic blocks, and as shown here, according to the runtime control flows. So here are two examples of the control flows. They differ at the second basic block. So the EM emanations will corresponding to these two control flows will be different at the time of the second basic block. This is because for that specific sections of the program, different instruction is executed. So they produce different EM signal patterns. This is basically to say that these EM signals like recorded during the executions can describe what the current control flow, the current execution is taking. And our system, our behavior models, our systems integrates like a large number of these EM signals to fingerprint the executions of the program. So here's an overview of our approach. Our approach has two steps. The first is the training stage, and the second is the deployment. During the training, we first collect the signal traces, EM signal traces during the program executions. We pre-process it to reduce the noise, and we use these signals to build a program behavior models to describe to fingerprint the program. And during the deployment stage, the query signal is also collected and pre-processed and matched with our established model. And the model will output a probability distribution that describes how well the current input query signals matches with each of the control flows. And based on the information of these probability distributions, we can test for anomalies. So I'm going to go through different part of it in details. So first, the signal collection. We have a PLC program here, and it's essentially a ladder logic program. We feed the PLC program with different test case inputs to let it go through different execution paths. So at the same time, we recorded the EM signals. So we will have a set of signals that correspond to different control flows, and this describe the execution behavior of the program. So how are we going to use this to train the model, to train the behavior models? We face two challenges. First one is the signals we observed are noisy. So this is because it suffers from the interference from other components on the board and from other devices in the environment. This means that we cannot observe repeatable patterns in the time domain. Also, these PLC instructions, they don't have a fixed instruction execution time. Here are some examples of the PLC instructions and their corresponding execution times that we extracted from the user manual. So in this way, different from some other side channel papers with which they truncate the signals according to some fixed clock cycles and do the analysis. We just cannot do that. To solve these two problems, we borrow ideas from the speech processing, where we apply a sliding window with overlap on the signals to extract the signal segments from the EM signal. We converted this signal segments into its frequency representations to get rid of the noise. This is because the process of converting from time domain to the frequency domain is essentially doing a weight sum of the signal points. So during the process, the random white noise are suppressed, and the underlying signal components are preserved. We convert all these signal segments into their frequency representations. We will have a spectrum sequence. We name it spectrum sequence. Here's a visualization of the spectrum sequence here. Each row of it corresponds to one spectrum in the previous signal segments. And the vertical axis corresponds to the time. This signal is collected during the booting process of the PLCs when the PLC is initializing different components on the device. As it can be seen from these visualizations, the signal patterns changes along the time. So these are time-varying spectrum patterns characterize the EM signals to actually describe, as I mentioned, to describe the executions of the program. And then we go to the program behavior model modeling sections, stages. So speak of the choice of the models, like consider we have a sequence input, so it's intuitive that we have a spectrum, a sequential neural network model input. So this is essentially a sequence classification models where we have our spectrum sequence as the input, and the model predicts the current control flow that the current execution takes. We employ a long short memory neural network units to process the input sequence. The LSTM layers, the long short term memory layers, are able to capture the structure of the input sequence. This is because it maintains hidden state vectors along the sequence. That is to say, like at each time step, the current state vectors are computed based both on the previous state vectors, which carry the history information, and the current input spectrum. So in this way, the model is able to capture the contextual informations in the spectrum sequence, and these contextual informations are essentially the transitions between the different spectrums in the sequence. And these transitions, they're important because this describes how the executions flows from like the basic blocks. And also, our model is able to extract these discriminative features. Like this is like a data-driven approach, and these data-driven approaches, feature extraction approaches, are proven recently to be very promising. The form of our models, the form of our models of the output is the probability distributions over all the possible execution paths or control flow. And each of the values here, the probabilities, describes like how likely the current input signal comes from the specific control flow. So we train our models to have the output probability distributions to bias significantly to the actual control flow or the actual path. In this way, our models is able to capture the structure of the input sequence better, and the margins between the true values and the other values are larger, so which makes predictions easier. And then we go to the signal system deployment stage, where we collected the query signals and we process it, and we match it with our models to output a probability distribution. So we have the probability distribution here. To track the executions of the program, we treat the index of the largest probabilities to be the current control flow that the current executions is taking. And the value of it we viewed as the likelihood scores. Here is some data we collected, the result of the likelihood scores. So to produce the plot, we collected EM signals for 100 legitimate executions and 100 anomalies. We feed these 200 signals into our models, and we will have the 200 likelihood scores. We compute a histogram of it to produce this distribution. And the blue lines correspond to the legitimate executions, and the right one correspond to the anomalies. So it can be seen that the legitimate executions, since they are matched with our models, so they tend to have a high likelihood scores, while the anomalies have lower likelihood scores. So based on this, simply put a threshold on the distributions or the likelihood scores, we were able to test if there is anomaly or not. The choice of the threshold depends on the actual applications. Like for example, depends on like the false positive rate the application can tolerate. Next, we're going to show how we're going to evaluate our systems. So here's the setup again. Our target is Arlen Bradley PLCs. Arlen Bradley PLCs are mostly used in North America. And we collected the signals with the AKGP 170 microphones without the transducers. Without the transducers, the microphone can be viewed as an EM probe. We amplify the signals with a 40 dB gun, and finally put it into the oscilloscope with under a sampling rate of 50 megahertz. Before we actually collect the signals for the evaluation programs, we look at the possible emanation sources on the board. So we look at the two SMD capacitors, the two FPGA chips, and the proprietary chips. So here is the result of the 5 locations, and this is essentially the same signals and the local spectrum characteristics of the signals that collected from that location. And as can be seen from this figure, that the proprietary chip has the largest, has the strongest signal strength, the pattern strength. And this is because it has larger surface areas, so the EM waves will be able to transmit longer from the processors into the air. We also compared our approach with a baseline hidden marker model approach. In this way, that the hidden marker model is used as the behavior model. Hidden marker models has previously been used in these side-channel applications, like they try to track the executions of the program on the microcontroller under the power side channel. But in our case, like we used the signal segments as the observations of the hidden marker model, and we considered both the time representations and the frequency representations of the signal. So there are 4 combinations: LCM or HMM, time or frequency. So they are shown in the results. This is the programs that we use to evaluate our systems. They range from some basic vector arithmetics to some complicated control systems like the particle filter. And these programs come from various applications, and shown here. Here's the result of our execution tracking accuracies. As that can be seen from the table, that our proposed method have a very good accuracies on this execution tracking. And this is the result for the anomaly detections, which is the ROC curves. So for the 4 curves, each of the curves correspond to the 1 combinations that we have, and they are the result over the 10 applications, the 10 programs. For this ROC curve, like the area under curve is the criteria that try to measure the performance of the detectors. So larger the area under curves, and the legitimate executions and the anomalies are better separated. So the performance of the detectors are better. As can be seen that our proposed method, which is the blue line, has much better detection performance over other setups with an area under curve of 0.99. So we created the good performance of our systems into 2 aspects. The first, that we used the frequency domain representations, which are more discriminative and repeatable, compared to the noisy time domain representations. And also, we use these sequential neural network models, which are able to capture longer data dependence in the sequence, and therefore the dependence in the control flows. These dependent long time dependencies are important in the control flows of the programs, because, like for example, one branch decision is correlated with several past branches. Like think of a correlating branch predictor, right? So to have a further insight on the systems, we also compared our systems with like the influence of the sliding window size. So looking at the signals with different window sizes, essentially look at the signals under different granularities. So smaller windows, which means that we will have shorter signal segments. In that way, the frequency resolutions will be lower. So it's not going to be that discriminative and cannot describe the control flows well. And for larger windows, even if like we have longer, like better resolutions, frequency resolutions, but the temporal granularities will be worse, which means that the small transitions in the time will probably be ignored. So there is a trade-off between the frequency resolution and the temporal granularities. We observe the same observation, same results for the performance detection of detection. And the maximum performance is achieved at the window size of 200 microseconds. We finally compiled our systems with respect to the process time. So we define the process time of our systems to be the time required to pre-process the signals and to pass it to the network model. So overall, in general, like these the time for each of these cases and the window size compared to the actual length of the programs are reasonable, which means that our systems operates efficiently at runtime. But also note that for the LSTM, our proposed models, which involves a lot more array computations, which are time consuming, so the process time actually is longer compared to the HMM approach. But this is in the sacrifice of the accuracies and all that sort of things. Finally, we noticed that the first larger and smaller windows, the process time all decreased. This is because for larger windows, we will have a smaller number of signal segments. So our sequential models will have fewer recurrences. So the time needed is less. And for smaller windows, each signal segments will be smaller. So the array computations need less time. So the process also decreases. To conclude, we proposed a runtime execution monitoring framework on the programmable logic controllers. We use the air-gapped electromagnetic sensing. So in this way, it won't cause, for example, the delays or resource constraints in the PLC, and also it stays away from the attack vectors that are tackling at the PLC. We proposed a online signal processing framework to process the input signal, EM signals, and use these signals to build a behavior models to describe the executions of the program. We evaluate our systems on some real control logic programs, and we achieved 99% accuracies. Yeah, thank you, and I'm ready to take questions.
Hi, my name is Chris Hauser from University of Southern California. First of all, nice work and nice talk. And I was wondering, what is the minimal code change that this approach might be able to detect in terms of, say, an attacker changes a single instruction in a basic block? Would that be too small of a change to be detected, or is that something that can be reliably detected, or does it mean more than just a single instruction change?
Oh yeah. So this actually corresponds to the granularities of our system. So as I say, there is a trade-off between the frequency resolutions and the time granularities. So we are currently investigating some time frequency analysis techniques, for example, like the wavelet, to deal with these problems. So in that way, the local signal segments will covers currently the local signal segments cover several a couple of instructions. So if there is small changes in the instructions, it might not be detected. But with the help of these time frequency analysis techniques, we're probably able to do that. So we're currently investigating that approach.
Okay, so currently, what would be a rough estimate of the granularity of the, what's a reasonable size change that
So we're able to so for replacement of one basic block, for example, we're able to detect that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Konstantinos Koilias from George Mason University. I couldn't help noticing that the basic assumption of your approach was that noise, you jump to frequency domain because noise is on one side, the meaningful patterns are on the other side, right? So in your experiments, I'm not sure exactly what kind of equipment you used, if it has operating system and all. What I'm trying to say is that what if you use something more advanced with an operating system that may produce noise, background noise, because of its normal execution, that covers all frequencies or multiple frequencies, so it makes it hard for you to see the patterns. Also, what kind of programs did you use? I saw a few in a table you had, but I think they were fairly simple, a few commands, I suppose. Um, and they were not like full-blown programs like what we use in industrial environments.
Oh, you mean the loops, like the...
Yeah.
Okay. So that's only for the purpose of to demonstrate that, like, that's only the pseudocode, and to demonstrate the purpose of like how we produce the signals for each instruction.
Hmm. So I believe that it is very clear. I mean, the instructions were really clear in what was running on any given time, right? Um, and I assume that the equipment you used did not rely on operating system. Is that correct?
Yeah, it doesn't rely on. It's just the EM sensors. Like,
Also, did you run any experiments? Did you try to replicate the experiment with different manufacturers, different boards, and also different sensor distances? So you place the antenna, the microphone on different distances and see what's going
yeah,
on.
yeah. So we test the distance, and the details are in our papers. For the mode of the PLCs, we only tested on the Allen Bradley, and for the sensors, we also have another EM prop, but this one works better.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Ioannis Akatakos from Stevens University. So I couldn't help but notice that your work reminded me a lot of another one called Zero Profiling Emanation from Georgia Tech. What is the difference between your work and their work?
Oh yeah, so actually I cite their papers, right?
I didn't have the chance to read your paper.
Okay. No, I mean in the slides I cite them. So one possible applications of EM side channels is to profiling the program executions. So they're trying to do like they're trying to uncover different parts of the programs, like loops and other components of the program. But what we're focusing on is to detect the anomalies, the attacks, those kind of.
Okay, because that gives me the second question. So both of those approaches depend a lot on training on a given program, right? You need to profile the program. But how do you guarantee that you have full code coverage to create all the basic blocks and the full control graph so that you can detect the anomaly or profile everything?
So means that, so you're trying to say like, how can we have like a high coverage?
Yes.
Of the program? So we use symbolic executions to go through each of these PLC control programs. So to extract the test cases from it, and the details can be found in the trusted safety verifier paper. To have these execution paths.
Yes, but that doesn't generate an expected or realistic control flow profiling over time. You force the program to maybe have coverage and maybe explore it, but you mentioned that you want to find correlation between time and hidden Markov models, right? So if you use the profiling to create it this way, then you don't have the logical connections.
So like I said, we have a set of signals, and all these signals are put into our behavior models. And our model is going to integrate, sorry, not this one. Our model is going to integrate these input signals to describe the behavior of the behavior of the program. So which means that the dependencies are not between the signals, are within the same signals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, great work. I just had one quick question. I was wondering, so you implemented all the programs that you mentioned in the table in the PLC?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the structured text, like actually, language.
All right. Okay. Well, no more questions. Let's thank the speaker again.